Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your hosts, Sami here with Angela Belford, and today we are joined by one of our favorite repeat guests, Corinna Dranow. Did I say Dranow right?
I don't know. I married the name. So I say Drano, but it could be Drano.
Dranow.
It's not Drano. That
It's
would
not
be
Drano. Okay. That's a plumbing agent, Drano.
absolutely. So
Okay.
Drano is good.
Drano. So, Corinna, in case you haven't listened to some of her previous episodes, she is a therapist in the local Northwest Arkansas community. We are really excited to be wrapping up our Fun February series talking to Corinna. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Sami, how are we ending our Fun February series talking with a therapist? But trust me, stay with me. It's going to be great. Corinna has a very unique approach, I think. And I don't know that this is just you, but there is a unique tool and method that she uses within her therapy practice that we're going to be talking about today called Sandtray therapy. I have not been a part of this. Angela has. Corinna, why don't you take a moment to give us just an overview of what is Sandtray therapy for those who may not know?
Yes. Well, I'm grateful to be here again. Thank you. You two are just so amazing, that mother-daughter team, and working together, and all the amazing content you've had so far. So thanks. It's
Thank
exciting.
you.
Well, we came thinking about Sandtrays. Ben Angela came and met with me in my office, and I have a Sandtray there, and that's how we started talking about it. So it is not grown out of my idea thing. There's actually, it's been, I believe it's been since the 1930s is when it was developed in Germany, and I am from Germany. um, some of the history facts might not 100% align, but Dora Kauf was the woman that started it, and it's based on, you may have heard of dream analysis by Carl Jung, and it's based on the ideas is that images have a really big impact on us, and that's why we dream about snakes or whatever it is people dream in the middle of the night, or monsters, or some bizarre stuff. And so it's based about the idea that our internal psyche knows how to heal itself, just like in dreams. What is Sandtray therapy? Well, visualize or imagine my office, and for the YouTube, you can probably put up some pictures, but um, I have a cabinet, a media cabinet, and when you open it up, there are shelves and shelves, and on the shelves, I have little miniatures, like mini figurines, trees, houses, um, suns, traffic, vehicles, all kinds of things, figurines, and we call them miniatures. And then over on the side, I have two sand trays, and they're sitting on the table, so you can kind of stand at them or sit, because adults can also play in the sand. And it is not the kind of sandbox that you'd imagine at a playground where, huge and big and you get sand in, but this is just to play in. It's a tabletop, and it has a very specific size requirement. So it's about 2 or 3 inches tall, and it's the size of like a tote box or something, like one of those uh,
Rubbermaid.
yeah. Wasn't sure if I could say that, but like, big plastic container
Not
with
a
a lid on.
sponsor.
Well, we could make it one. My the professional sand tray boxes are made out of wood, and I had somebody make it, and they're supposed to be blue on the inside, and then you cover it with sands. And I have a white sand, really fine, beautiful, that I collected on the beach in Florida, and the other box is red sand, kind of like in Utah, that area. And people create a world. So there's different instructions, but basically imagine, we're processing something, and I'm saying, hey, let's take that to the sand. And then the client and I get up and we walk over to the table, and I say, like, don't overthink it. Just pick up whatever, item calls you out, it speaks to you, is interesting to you, or sparks a memory, and put it in the sand tray and create a world. So this is like very non-directive. I can do it more directive too, but so create a world, and I just said have fun with it. Don't overthink it. Yeah. And there I guess I'll go into it a little bit later, but there's lots of research based how that helps um, the brain process. But I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later.
No, that's a beautiful overview, and I think thank you so much for that just super descriptive language. Having never been in your office, I feel like I can see it, so thank you for that. Angela, having been through it, what was it like?
Well, it's really funny because I had forgotten that I pulled up my pictures, and it's been over a year now that we actually did this. And until she said it's non instructive or non descriptive, I forgot the immense frustration I had when she first said, create a world. I was like, what does that mean? And it would be so fascinating because I know I've regulated my nervous system a lot since then. And so but I didn't like the lack of parameters. I mean, there's when she talks about the media cabinet, I mean, it felt like they were like 3 to 4 like bookshelves full of things. Now, what I love is that they were kind of organized and grouped in things. And so there was definitely some areas that felt like they were travel or like your country of origin or the countries that resonate. So there were things that represented those different things. And then there was another area that was like could represent careers, and there was another section that was like all the play things were kind of grouped together. So I loved that because it didn't feel chaotic, even though there's just a lot of different options. And so I'm just like randomly picking things and randomly doing this thing and feeling super uncomfortable. Like, am I doing it right? And I'm like, you guys know how I talk about indicator lights and how, like, when we have these sensations and these emotions, then they're an opportunity for you to go, ooh, okay, Miss I Love Freedom. Duh, like it's still got some lingering perfectionism. Literally, sand tray. We're supposed to be playing here, and I'm worried that I'm doing not doing it right. And anyway, so those were kind of the first insights. So even just the experience of just setting to try to do it, and we weren't in a therapy situation. It was literally like she's like, "Hey, I think you'll have fun doing this," and I was just like, "Yeah." And so it's funny that we're doing this for Fun February, and the first thing I say is, "Oh my gosh, I was so uncomfortable," but
Angela,
there's
but that's
also a lot
interesting because
to
we've also talked about how you had a challenge opportunity that it was like, pick some of these things to do every day for 90 days. And you had a lot of resistance to the idea of do something fun every single day for 90 days.
right.
I feel like this is similar. And
Hmm.
I also don't think that you're alone and that there are a lot of adults that are like, what is fun anymore? And hopefully not so much anymore after you've been listening to this series and you've been able to engage with that. But I don't think it's uncommon. Corinna, what about you? Do you think that as people approach the sand tray, is there some resistance a lot or maybe not? Or are we unique? That's fine if we are.
You can find every single reaction in the on the earth to that. One of the really, really amazing benefits of it is that sometimes in therapy there's times where it's like I really just don't want to feel like unpacking one more thing today. I'm feeling so good. I really didn't even want to come into therapy. People say that all the
Mm.
like, ooh, okay, this is very pregnant because something is coming out. But I also don't want to rock the boat. You're feeling great. Let's celebrate it. Let's have like a good time. But there's also just the Sandra is geared towards situations where we can't put it in words what's
Mm.
going on. Like we either can't or we don't know how to or we just can't remember things. And to your question, so usually I wouldn't do a Sandra in the very first meeting and the very first sitting down there, but I bring it up several times in the therapy process so people kind of get used to the idea, and some people are like, yes, let's go play, I really don't want to talk, or when I feel like they're being stuck, when there's something it's like I'm just like ready to do like I know there's more but I don't want to talk about it, or I'm and let's just take it to the sand and have some fun. And
Mm.
very often, so for people like Angela, like in the beginning, I would just say, well, let's just feel the sand and play the sand. Would you like some water? We can pour some water in so the sand will stick. Or, here are the matches. We can light some stuff on fire. Or, well, we've burned a lot of letters to people in the sand tray, actually,
Mm.
too. I mean, that's a great place to burn to burn shit. Excuse me, but
Love it.
so-
Usually, if it's something that needs to be processed that you need to burn, it probably is warrants some cussing. So you're
that
good.
is why I said that word deliberately. So yes, we'll burn stuff. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, you're fine. You're good.
So then there's other people that just are so ready and they can't wait to just, oh, and this, and I pick something up. Oh my God, I had one of these of my childhood because I've done this since 1996. So I've collected a lot of Disney series kind of that people had completely forgotten. Oh, this is what the original Cinderella looked like, right? Or
Mm.
now that it's been reproduced and things like that. So or people like, oh my gosh, I have like this cute little fairy go around a merry-go-round, and people's like, oh my gosh, I've loved being on these. Or like, oh God, this makes me so afraid of heights. I mean, it already in that little interaction so much comes out that um inspires people to talk more about things.
So that would be my follow-up question. Then what? People play with the sand tray, they put the figurines in. Angela gets frustrated saying, "I don't know what you want me to do." Put some stuff in there. What happens next? What's the, I guess the question I'm asking is kinda what's the point without that there has to be a point?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the very, very basic point is that we trust the psyche to heal itself. The psyche,
Mm.
your inner parts to heal yourself. Whatever you end up creating is going to be a healing project, no matter what you do. Um, so it can get really intense, actually. My role as a therapist is not really to be an animator or to ask you lots of questions. Or most of all, my role is not to analyze. Just like with dreams, really only you are the holder of the information what your dreams mean to you. And so the santry is the same. It's that I take a back stand. I observe, being a witness. People creating their inner worlds with a witness is incredibly powerful. So I'm really very quiet. I take some notes about sometimes how people move things, and so later on I could notice it for them or point it out if it comes about. But I'm just sitting there and watching them do, and I watched Angela, get really frustrated, and I might say, just notice how that frustrates you. Just notice like that's something. Maybe we can visit that later why that was frustrating. And Angela did, right? She just now visited it. And so between 10 and 20 minutes usually is kind of what people take. And at one point, every time they're like, I'm done. There comes a point where you're like, yeah, it's exactly how I wanted it. Every time it's when people say, I'm done. Suddenly, like it's like they feel like, okay, I'm done with processing this. So
Mm.
then I encourage them to look at it from different angles and see if there's something that if they notice. Is there anything you notice if you step over to the right or if you go up on your tippy toes? Um, yeah, this person is so much bigger than everybody else. Or um, and then I ask, and so the work happens not necessarily in us talking about. The work happens in the creation of it, and there's a lot of research done once again how it helps your brain process things in different ways. And um, but I use it in this session and the session after. um, all of a sudden people have found some words like their spouse who they're at the moment mad at, they put them in the form of a bulldog, and then they also put them in some, other ways. All of a sudden, there's some more words. Like when he is
Mm,
acting this way and pointing at the bulldog without calling, that person a bad name, that already like is giving names to things. And so then I'll ask, um I might ask, not always, but is there something that sticks out to you? And I know it's cliche, but since I'm a therapist, I work into the feelings. So it's like, well, are there any kind of emotions that stood out to you? How about this area? This looks um, like maybe there's a little bit more for you to tell me about if you want to. Or,
mm,
I'm very non directive, but there is also an entire directive way of doing things. And I'll talk about that later. But this is the general thing is it just starts and without a fail, I have never had somebody build a sand tray where they didn't say, "Oh my God, I just realized this." Angela just
mm.
did it when we looked at the pictures, before we started the podcast. Like, oh my God, this happened. Angela, actually, do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, well, yes, sure, of course. Had lots of thoughts going on. For if you are on the if you join us on YouTube, I'm actually going to share my screen so that we can talk about the sandbox that I created. And I was going to say, I remember that feeling of completion, of like it just feeling like, okay, it's just done. Also, you sent me some information before this episode about the importance of like integration. And I talk about that in Traveling Light, that when we're looking at trauma, trauma is something that happens to us that our brain can't make sense of. And so when we are able to make sense of something and integrate it into our lives, then we can heal from it. So I love that this is such a just low key, I kind of want to say, but also just a very safe feeling way to be able to experience that. So this is my sand tray that I created. We have a little Abraham Lincoln on the left, which my big aha today was I do some policy work, which I talk about a little bit, but not a whole lot. It's things that are, will affect generations of housing, but on a day-to-day basis isn't going to change anybody's life today. Anyway, I'll be spending the next couple of years for sure, at least once or twice a year in DC. So I was like, oh, I'll get to see that. Um, I had been to the Coliseum that year, and so this represented the travel that I do and also my faith. There's a little cross here. Well, the thing that still intrigues me about this sandbox that I created is that I use necklaces to create these two kind of spheres, if you will, and there's a thing of in one of the spheres, well, I guess all of the little miniatures in this outer sphere represent fun to me. So there's a dice that represents games, there's a seashell that's like going to the beach, there's a Ferris wheel, there's sunshine, there's flowers, there's all of these things that are very much related to having fun. And then on this inner one, I do not know, this little unicorn that is going out of that is still curious to me. And then it's not surprising to me that Wonder Woman is in here. My sweet husband is a chef, and so the fact that I have the little Smurf guy, and I call him Papa Smurf all the time, so the fact that I call him this little Smurf chef guy means yay, my husband's on the inner side, on the inside of this. So anyway, it felt super random when I was like picking these objects and putting them together. And then when I got done, I was like, whoa, this represents like a whole lot of my life in a very just quick, easy form. And it it was it was enlightening, and also I liked how I didn't have a lot of cognitive processing, because one of the things that I advocate, if you're a regular listener, you know that I'm like, feeling your feelings is not always a cognitive expression. It is often you need some physical activity. We need to release that emotion. We need to like let the energy move. And so this is such a cool way to let the energy move by literally playing. The question I have for you, and I do this where I go on these, I talk a lot and then I have a question, but I'm curious there is, if there's correlation or if it's more chicken egg situation, people that are um, reluctant to play and maybe are struggling with emotional regulation and flexibility, is this helpful to them, and or does this play type of therapy actually let me get a little more emotional flexibility so that then I can play more in my the rest of my life? And I don't know, that may be a roundabout wrong way to ask that question, but I'm very curious about like, if, does it encourage people to play outside of therapy? Maybe I
Mhm.
guess is the best way
Oh,
to ask the question.
encouraged to play outside of therapy. I don't know about that. I'd have to think. It's probably depends on the personality.
Okay.
So I'm thinking. I pulled up my neurobiology cheat sheet that I kind of wrote up. So I'll give you a little bit of that information first. How it works. Um, it elicits different responses in the brain, and and I know, Angela, you talk about this a lot, different regions in the brain. There's the
Hmm.
prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
and the amygdala are the ones that we basically mostly talk about.
Hmm.
And so a little X course. So we experience the emotions in that amygdala kind of region, right? And then the thought behind it, the talking about it, the processing happens in the cortex. So when we sit in therapy and we talk about things, often those are just works. And then people say, I know I should not smoke, but I still do it. Right. Or I know I should not get angry. I know there's no reason to get angry and still. And that's because the connection between, so, just in lay terms, I guess, but the connection, the prefrontal cortex and amygdala do not talk with each other. They
Mm.
have not the same language. They cannot, your brain cannot tell your emotions to stop worrying. It's just, it does help to do it over time, but I'm sure you've all had that. It's like, oh, I know I really shouldn't be angry, and then you have to do all that other kind of work. The way how they talk to each other is through experiences.
Mm.
So, um, I don't know. You're for There's a strange example, but let's say you're terribly afraid of spiders, and your brain keeps saying they're harmless. It's not a harmful spider, and you can tell you that all the time. But until you actually touch a spider and don't get bitten, you experience cannot the feeling of I'm actually safe touching this spider. The experience is what tells us we're okay, we're safe.
Mm.
And so the theentry is taking it's a tactile nonverbal thing, and there's lots of other techniques, but theentry
Mhm.
is just one technique. And on a side note, I'm a trauma therapist, and I do EMDR, which is a form of therapy, and I integrate all these things together. So I sometimes, well, I'll just say, well, let's take it to the sand and have the experience of what it feels like to, Angela put the boundaries, those beats that you put around him. What does it feel like separating out your inner world, the people that you trust, and your outer world, and to be aware that you have this one part here and the other part there? The question was, what was your question?
Doesn't
How
matter.
Oh, if it I think you were thinking, does it actually help people heal, or would it make them worse
Oh,
or
no,
better?
no, no. It's more of
Kind of
like if you're somebody who has been struggling through this podcast series going, I have a hard time playing. Oh, well, maybe there's there's maybe that's an indicator that you need some more emotional flexibility, some more emotional regulation, and perhaps maybe sand tray therapy could unlock that so that then it might be a little bit easier for you to play and have fun, is one idea.
So one of the reasons I got really interested in it is when I first in 1996 had my own therapy, and it was she was an art therapist, an artist, great, and I have an artist soul but lack the ability, and I know it's not about the outcome and all that, but that didn't work for me. And the same with journal. I wouldn't write things down. And she said, well, but I'm also a very tactile person, so um it allowed me to create this. They're usually the Santry worlds look beautiful. They always look great. People end up putting some flowers in there or some moons and suns and sparkles or whatever they have to do. So it's like you create something really beautiful that you can feel proud of. Um, I'm not saying it works any better than art therapy. It's just a different way
Hmm.
to access something inside yourself and then gain the confidence that you've created something beautiful that people will often say like, well, I went to the beach and I actually created this little thing out of shells and sticks that I did, and I actually had the confidence to try something outside the box and something different. So it reactivates some things in the brain that have been lost by doing that in the sand or using the water or uh, it's kind of like reawakens a little piece in you.
I feel like the communication nerd in me, I feel like one of the benefits could be that there's so many times when we're trying to process through something or we're even trying to describe it that coming up with the words is a challenge. And, they say in journalism, a picture is worth a thousand words. There's almost when you pick a figurine and you use the example, somebody picked a bulldog and said, and my husband is acting like this, there's so much meaning that can be pulled from that to say, this is what it feels like. This is what, a similar association to then notice that. Notice when somebody is behaving in a way that feels kind of like a bulldog, and you may not describe them as aggressive, and you may not describe them as, mean or whatever it might be, but if somebody, yeah, I don't know, I just imagine that you were able to put different meaning and words to something where words felt lost before. It also reminds me a lot of how children process things, and that I know as a parent, one of the things that I have been told a lot is that children process through play. And so sometimes, especially when there is something really hard or a big struggle in your kid's life, they can process that through play. I have heard stories of other parents who've had children who had to deal with school shooter drills at school, or even like an active shooter who then came home and started playing that. And the parents were mortified that their kid was playing through this really traumatic situation. And yet, the reason that they were playing through it was because that is how their brain is needing to process what is going on and needing to understand it. And it's not innately a bad thing to play or to process through something hard or traumatic or maybe disturbing, because it can help what you're talking about with that experience, that prefrontal cortex connection with the amygdala, and being able to go through that together. It just makes so much sense to me of another facet. And I love that point that you made, that art therapy works. I know people talk about even like horse therapy is different methodology, and the sand tray therapy. It's not that there is one singular method that everybody has to go run to go do this thing. But if you are out there needing some healing and some processing, golly, there's a lot of tools available to you. It's figuring out what are the right tools for your toolbox, and how can you explore and how can you process these things through maybe a more playful thing like a sand tray.
Well, going back for a second, Basil Vanderkolk, the one that wrote The Body Keeps the Score. Yep, I'm sure y'all mentioned it in several podcasts. But he, to quote him lightly, said something around the resolution of trauma lies in, now I missed the word.
The integration.
Lies in the integration and,
Integration.
I have to go back and, oh, resolution, duh. So many different forms of therapy help you find a resolution or reprocessing or remembering. There's different ways to find a resolution, but sooner or later in our lives, we look at these little, and there's not just big traumas, there's lots of little traumas we have. And so one of the ways Santry or art therapy is used is to process these little traumas and finding resolutions, and sometimes even memories of things you only have vague memories of. And
Mhm.
people always like, will you help me find the memories of what happened? I'm like, no, if your body stores it, then there's a reason for why you're not talking about why it's not coming out. Let's just take it slow.
Mhm.
But would you like to take it to the sand tree and find things that in our restricted language can't process or find a resolution for, but this deeper part of ourselves, the psyche, knows how to heals itself. Um,
I love that.
so, but what you had brought up, and I think is like, can I take this into my everyday life? Right? I
Mm.
think is what I heard you say. Okay, I don't want to go to therapy, or then I at this point I'm therapied out or whatever, but I do feel like, and feel like playing in the sand. um so first of all, one of the questions, does it have to be sand, or can I just make a collage, or can I just make a vision board, or all these things are great things. The sand works a little bit different. There's something specific about the earth's connection to the earth, and the fine grains and the way it feels in your hand, the way you can shape it, or in the sand tree you can hide things under, right?
Mhm.
Or you can, hide parts of it. So the sand works a little bit different than, but that's okay. If you're at home, if you want to create one of these little Zen, you've probably seen these little Zen garden things.
Mhm.
Um, I have one of those to just play with. And I do have little miniatures. Oh, I was going to pull out, I have a teeny little elf on the shelf, that represents all kinds of stuff, magic, fantasy, vision, childhood, whatever. And you can create your own very beautiful things by collecting just rocks and sticks, and you can, I mean, make a whole work of art. And you can already feel just like it's like your at least for me, my nerve endings, I'm starting to calm down, putting my fingers to the sand, the rake that they have, using a fork.
Mhm.
You can't could have your own little sand tray at home. um but you can also just be what's called a floor play. You could create, what's important when you do that is that I think that you have the boundaries of a santry, that you have a dedicated area, like put a towel, a small little towel on the table, or so you have an area. And you can just create a beautiful world and go around your household and find some, just have some fun with it.
Mhm.
um, Create a little, some people call it an altar, right? People already have it. They have an area where they put all the things that are important to you on your
Mhm.
little side table, a picture of their mom, or this item have been given to me by my friend who passed. Or so you want to, every once in a while, encourage you to rearrange that a little bit and play with it and touch it, and like put it in a different order and just like interact with it. It's not the same as sand tree therapy, but that is something fun to do at home that just encourages you to go get away from the rigid mind of, I have to talk about this problem with somebody, or
Mm.
rigid thinking of, this is just stupid little play that makes no sense.
Mhm.
There's enough neurobiological research, neuroscience research behind this, um, to prove that it actually works. And it makes sense. I mean, touching things, even just, and so there's some other mindful things. I've got this mug, it says girl boss. Certain days I bring it out, and and it's not smooth, it's dented. So I mindfully, intentionally just notice how it's not perfect and how it's one of my favorite mugs, anyways.
Mhm.
So now we're transitioning into talking about being more intentional with your environment,
Mhm.
and integrating that, like noticing, yeah, this is really not perfect, but man, it says girl boss on the front, whatever that, whatever that means, and it's got good coffee inside. And so just kind of like appreciating that and making that connection of feeling alive.
Mm.
um
I love that. We are this year, our theme is how to have a freaking awesome life. And so I love that we went from play and sand tray therapy to, oh, here's some other really cool techniques, of just being in your space. It's also funny because I typically don't drink any beverage except water on here. And today I felt like I wanted a mug. I wanted to be able to hold my warm mug. And so it's very interesting that today I was feeling super tactile and wanting that grounding, that connection. Also, the idea of when we're children, we're comfortable in sand. Right, sand. We don't ever go, ooh, I've got sand on my feet. Like we love the sand. And I think there's an element of this as I listen to you where I think this has got to be great for inner child work and really good for the idea of being able to access that inner child part of us because so much of, I would say that I'm in second wave nervous system healing right now, which is fascinating to me because I calmed my nervous system way down. And right now, the things that are coming up for me are really around acknowledging the little girl that's inside of me and what happened. And I recently had a situation where it was like I forgave the person for this thing they did, but I had never sat with 10-year-old me and gone, that really sucked, honey. I see you. And just like adult me kind of metaphorically holding that space, and I cried. I mean, just sobbed tears and just like deep gut wrenching. Even just talking about it, like my stomach, I can feel it coming up from my very core. And I think the more flexibility I have, which is probably why I keep pushing on this, but and this focus on play and allowing ourselves to re-access that, because sometimes we get to be adults and we're like, oh, we're supposed to be grown-ups now. Right? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, not all parts of being a grown-up. There's some parts of being a child and some things, lessons that I learned as a child that serve me very, very well. And I want to hold on to those lessons and I want to flourish those lessons. And there's other lessons I learned as a child that I'm like, that is not serving me and I don't need to. And in play, we can be like, oh, I'm gonna dress up like this today, and then it doesn't, and you dress up like something different. And so I love this whole idea, and I love the ability to kind of, it feels to me on multiple levels, this could be super helpful. You've mentioned art therapy. I also been recently become friends with somebody that does music therapy. And so I think there's a lot of modalities, and I really appreciate that. I think in our culture, there's like, oh, you do cognitive behavioral therapy. We go and we talk and we say, this is the problem and this is what I'm feeling. And, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I can't wait till we get to the point where we figure out that talk therapy is not actually that effective. 'Cause there are certain people that I'm like, no, it may not work for you. And so, anyway, this
well,
is
to that
fantastic.
I can say that it's that's if you focus on the content of what's being said, But a lot of why therapy works is because of the container. It's that 1 hour a week that's just about you, that
Mm,
you have. It's not about the other that you talk to. It's having somebody else on the outside looking in with you.
mm.
That's how Sanctuary works too. And it's just once again that boundary behind doors, like anything goes in a non-judgment mental environment. Definitely, if your therapy doesn't feel non-judgmental, I'm very judgmental about that. It's like you should not feel judged. You should not feel
Yeah, I
like you have
love
to be
that.
a good client and not, yeah. So, but and I think
Awesome.
most people feel pretty good and safe with their therapists once they get to know them. And if you don't, then you might want to find somebody else. Sometimes the energy doesn't work. I mean that
Right.
you can't,
Yeah.
you don't get along with everybody. But there's a couple of things I want to bring into that is um I know you, Angela, know about this already. It's called internal family systems, which
Mm.
is a form of therapy that talks about, or it comes from the point of, first of all, the word family is misleading. It's not about your external family, it's your internal family. And it's
Mhm.
is the idea that we all have many different family members inside us, or parts inside us that are contributing to our everyday life. And so, um, the many different parts, I envision is like, okay, I've got this round table this one way, right? And there's many different people sitting, and I am me, the self, the core, the person I want to be, the person I feel best at being. I call that the self. I'm at the head of the table, and I have to go and listen to everybody on the table and listen to what they have to say, because otherwise they're just going to sit there fidgeting the whole time through the meeting and not feeling heard, right?
Yep.
So in uh, internal family systems therapy, we visit the many different parts, and
So an example would be a part of me is really excited about this new opportunity. A part of me is really scared about this opportunity. That would be an
and
example when
then
you talk about the different parts, just in
and
case
then
somebody's having a
maybe
hard
there's a
time with
part
that.
of you that's, I'm sorry, I talked right over you.
No, go, go, go.
I, when then the part that's scared is actually self-sabotaging. So there's
Mm-hmm.
another part of you that's sabotaging your efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another part that's like closely related to, let's say, your mother, with critical comments. Yeah. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a very, very critical part. And like knowing all these parts and when they're activated, um, is really helpful in gaining sort of control back, focusing on the self, the part that you want to be, by these all these parts are acting out like the self-sabotaging because they're trying to protect you from something. So figuring out what you need protection from. Well, if my feelings being hurt, I'm afraid i'm I might, the self-sabotaging piece in you, I might not be successful with my government work.
Mm-hmm.
um so these critical voices are, we have to know they're there, and we have to make friends with them and listen to them, and also let them know, hey, I'm in charge. You don't have to worry. You don't have to rescue me. I've got this, right? I, Angela, got this.
Mm.
I'm good at what I do. And so putting back the sand tray, it's such an amazing place to discover your parts.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking, Angela, if you think back on your own sand tray and look at some of the parts in there, you don't have to, talk about what they meant to you, but can that make sense to you that there's,
Oh my, yes, absolutely. Because there's, the part of me that is like, I've got this. I'm Wonder Woman, if you saw that. And then there was definitely the parts that are a little more insecure, that feel childlike. And childlike can be great, right? Because then you're like, oh, the playful parts, but also childlike can feel like I don't actually know what I'm doing. I don't know I'm supposed to, how I'm supposed to show up in this space. And golly, I've talked about this on the podcast, but even just as early as last night, I was thinking about um I had a speaking gig, and the audience that I was speaking to, my husband said, I just want to tell you that, like, he was there and he's like, there was a different energy about you. And and it was with college kids, and he said, I wanted to notice for you that when you speak with college kids, and then so you're doing your passion of speaking, and then you have just such a deep deep love for that time, that season of life for people because they're shaping. He's like, it was noticeably different. And like you seemed just on fire and just like lit up and very passionate, and your energy was very different. And I noticed it. And I want to make sure you noticed it. And the insecure part of me was like, but but I don't know how that aligns with this business strategy we have, and how is that going to work, and what is it going to, oh my gosh, you're flaky again, you're going to change your mind again. And he's like, you have loved hanging with college students forever. Like, I literally, when my kids graduated, I started volunteering with a youth organization that serves college kids and love to have them to my house. And so he's like, you're not going to change. This isn't new for you. This is going to be anyway. So even in seeing my passion, oh, Sammy's got an observation.
Do you know why you love college kids? Because I think I do, and I'm curious if you know why you love college kids and why this age.
I, I don't know if I've ever thought about it. Oh, I mean,
So
I've said that you, well,
no,
I'll
go
let
ahead.
you answer because you're going to be.
No, no, give your
I've
answer first, and then I'll tell you what I'm 90% sure is the correct answer.
Okay. Well, I think there's an element of it. Number one is that I joke a lot and say parents think they finished raising their kids, and the that they're not. I think it's the time in our life when it is absolutely culturally acceptable to decide who you are. Like, I get pushback from 40 and 50-year-olds like, "Oh, if I start being fun and extroverted, then people are going to think that's weird." And in college, you get to decide who you are. And so, since that's such a big part of who I am and I want people to live intentionally, then I think that's why it is. It could also be that that's when I discovered who I was.
Bing, bing, bing. I think that's
Oh,
it, in my opinion, because Angela, your birth through 18, I mean, literally birth through 18 was such a traumatic roller coaster of just one change
mm,
after another and everything. And when you got to college, that was the most control you ever had of your own life. And that space, the people who poured into you at that time, the decisions that you made then that are still impacting you to this day in the best ways, you connecting with that age are getting to turn around and pour back into, because who knows what other Jenny Johnson is walking onto campus for the first time saying, I've never had this opportunity in front of me, that you get to go tell them, do you know that your life is in front of you? And
mm,
you shared with me last night that there was a girl who, one of the things that she learned from you speaking to her last night was it's not too late to heal, that in her mind, in college, she thought it was too late to start her healing journey. And you, Jenny Johnson, you knew Jenny Johnson
it was
back in
Angela
college.
Johnson by the time I was Angela Johnson in college, even.
I'm sorry.
So,
Yes,
you
you
know.
had. So you left high school as Jenny Johnson. You walked onto
No,
campus as
Angela.
Angela.
No, 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 no.
Oh,
Angela
okay.
Johnson. Yeah, no, I
You
changed my
walked
hair
onto
too.
campus
Anyway,
though, and
yes.
you got to decide this is where my healing journey will start, period, the end. And you get to give that hope, and pouring into that age range makes so much sense, because it's just you are getting to go back and be there for somebody else's college self in the same way that you get to do that healing and processing for your college self who went through all of that change. So it's not sand trade therapy, but it's you reflecting on things. But I'm just getting to notice that with
Mm,
you. I think it makes so much sense. It makes a lot of sense.
very sweet. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, sweet love.
I don't know where to go from there. I'm sorry I went on this tangent,
Yes,
not about
no,
sand
I
trade
know.
therapy, but it was still
Super
beautiful.
tangent, but that's
No, and it was
okay.
so beautiful. I'm sorry, Angela, what did you say?
Go.
Oh,
Oh no, back to you.
um, well, what came to mind is the word corrective emotional experience, where we're
Mm,
always for healing, striving and should have a lot of corrective emotional experiences. So you
mm,
talking to college kids provides you with a corrective emotional experience, and that's very, very healing. And so back to the sand tray, that's the same thing. Is
mm,
it The sand tray provides for a corrective emotional experience. You can um, create something that feels healing, and that, like, maybe back at the time you couldn't do it that way, but you're doing it now and okay with it.
What's
So
coming up for
that
you,
was
Angela?
mm. Ah. I don't know. Well, one of the things that last night, I was like, I was very proud of the presentation, and the power of the internet. This is being recorded at a time when separate from when we're going to air. But I said to my husband, I was like, okay, I did really well, and I want to keep working on my stories. And I was thinking of some of the stories. I was thinking of, like, I made the decision to actually say I'm not going to date anybody seriously until I like myself. I mean, what 18-year-old kid does that? I was 19 when and I dated lots of people non-seriously, had a lot of fun. But anyway, the day that I sat down at lunch and I said to my friends, okay, I like me. I like what I'm about. I would be my friend. And I remember all of them, and several of them are, actually all of them that were sitting at the table were I'm still friends with now. And they look at me like I absolutely lost my mind. They're like, Pumpkin, we've been your friend for a year and a half. Like, we do like what you're about. What are you saying? And that day was the day of the first date I had with Barry Belford, cute freshman boy, who I am now married to. And we just recently had 31 years since that first date. So 31 years since I decided I actually like me. That's so funny. That's this week. Anyway, and so there's just some stories of, like, some just moments in time that that I think could be very impactful if I will just embrace this idea of, like, no, 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 I really should just be with college students. Stop the madness. Anyway, okay, Corinna, let's land this plane. What is
okay.
something that you want people to leave? What can we leave people with?
Okay, quick, another agenda item is, as I was watching this beautiful interaction between the two of you, is that I love using the Santry for working with couples or family members. And I think the two of you should come in and just build the sand tray together. Just have fun, not to work through deeper issues, although, we know that always still happens, but not with the focus, but just to come in and work and create a sand tray together and do
Oh,
this, some of that corrective emotional experience and whatever. Um, the one thing I want people to um, take with them is the famous words, a cigar is not just a cigar, which is a terrible reference. I shouldn't have brought that up. It's a Freud sentence. And anyways, forget I brought that up. But really what I want
Cat,
people to leave with
rewind
is
that. We have a
you,
producer. She can edit that part out. Okay, go ahead. What do you
no,
want
no,
to leave
she can
people with?
keep it in.
Oh,
But whatever she wants to do. But the um like the psyche knows how to heal itself. And if you have some healing to do, be open to nonverbal processes, um, whatever that is for you. I'm feeling like even your podcast, although it's very, very verbal, but it's also very technical and all that, and airing it is a different healing tool. Just be open to the fact that whatever there's so much more you can do to heal, and every day you do heal. Everybody heals. People feel like stuck. It's like this is never going to get better, and it is. And so the Santra is just one tool, a nonverbal tool that people can use. Yeah, psyche knows how to heal itself. That's the underlying vibe, I think, for the day.
I love that. Thank you guys so much for being here and for listening and for joining us on this journey, particularly through Fun February. For now, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.